James watched Victoria leave his office in a huff, her heels clicking aggressively against the worn linoleum floor. Through the window, he observed her gesturing animatedly while speaking on her phone, no doubt already plotting her next move. He sighed, running a weathered hand through his salt and pepper hair. This wasn't his first rodeo with city folks who moved to Riverdale expecting country charm without country realities. "That one's gonna be trouble," said Deputy Garcia, leaning against the doorframe. At 28, he was the department's only other full-time officer and James's former ranch hand. "Yep," James replied, reaching for his hat. "Time to head back to the ranch. Keep an eye on things here." The drive home took James past the newly constructed Saddlebrook Estates, where homes 3 times the size of most Riverdale residences stood like alien spacecraft that had landed in the middle of hayfields. Tractors from the neighboring farms kicked up dust that drifted over pristine swimming pools and manicured lawns. James couldn't help but chuckle. Nature had a way of reminding folks who was really in charge. At the ranch, Abby was in the corral working with Thunderclap, a rescue horse with trust issues. Her patience with the skittish animal mirrored how she'd handled her transition back to rural life after years in Boston. Law degree gathering dust, she'd returned when cancer took her mother 2 years ago, intending to stay just long enough to help her father transition. Yet something about the rhythm of ranch life had kept her here. "We've got a situation," James called out, leaning against the fence. Abby looked up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That new neighbor again?" "Yep. Came to my office today. Called our place an environmental hazard." He mimicked Victoria's crisp, condescending tone. "Seriously? We run the cleanest operation in the county. Solar panels, composting system, natural fertilizers." Abby's indignation rose, her hand absently stroking Thunderclap's neck to keep him calm, despite her changing energy. "Facts don't matter much to folks who've already made up their minds," James said, stepping into the corral. "She doesn't know this town, doesn't understand how things work here." Abby's phone pinged with a notification. "Well, she's learning fast. Look at this." James squinted at the screen to see a newly created Facebook group. "Riverdale Property Owners for Responsible Rural Standards," with Victoria Preston listed as administrator. The cover photo showed Wild Oak Ranch from an unflattering angle, focusing on the equipment shed that needed repainting. 26 members already, Abby noted, all from Saddlebrook. James handed the phone back. "Your mother would have invited her over for coffee and sent her home with fresh eggs and a different perspective." He smiled sadly. "I'm not as diplomatic. Maybe I should try talking to her." Attorney to ex-executive, Abby suggested. "Worth a shot," James nodded. "But I've got a feeling Ms. Preston didn't move all the way out here just to back down at the first sign of resistance." As if on cue, they heard the distinctive sound of the Range Rover slowing down on the road. Through the trees, they could see Victoria standing beside her vehicle, taking more photos and making notes on her tablet. "And so it begins," James said quietly. Thunderclap snorted, as if in agreement. What neither the sheriff nor his daughter noticed was Victoria's smile as she took those photos. Not the satisfied smile of someone gathering evidence, but the calculating smile of someone who just discovered her opponent's potential weakness. On her tablet screen was the county assessor's website, showing that a small corner of the Wild Oak Ranch property line had never been properly surveyed after a creek changed course 50 years ago. The first light of dawn revealed the full extent of the devastation. From her second-floor window, Victoria surveyed what remained of her carefully planned landscaping, now submerged beneath coffee-colored water. Her designer furniture bobbed grotesquely through the first floor like bloated corpses. "Hello, is anyone there?" she called out weakly, her voice hoarse from hours of shouting. Her phone had died sometime during the night, and the water had climbed halfway up her staircase before stabilizing. The isolation was perhaps the worst part, not knowing if help was coming, if anyone even remembered she was here. A distant sound caught her attention, the rhythmic splashing of something large moving through water. Leaning out her window, Victoria spotted James on horseback, leading 2 more mounted ranch hands through the submerged streets of Saddlebrook. They were systematically checking each home, marking those that had been cleared with bright orange ribbons. Her momentary relief at seeing rescuers was quickly supplanted by the humiliating realization that her salvation would come at the hands of the very man she'd been trying to destroy. Victoria retreated from the window, pride warring with self-preservation. "There's someone in the Preston house," one of the ranch hands called out, pointing toward her partially hidden figure. Victoria watched James guide his horse toward her home. Even from a distance, she could see the exhaustion etched into his features. His clothes were soaked through, his sheriff's badge glinting dully in the morning light. How long had he been out here? Had he slept at all? "Miss Preston," he called up. "You okay up there?" She wanted to say she was fine, that she didn't need his help. The words died in her throat as she looked at the churning water below, carrying debris from her neighbors' homes. Garden furniture, children's toys, a propane tank that could become deadly if it ruptured near a source of ignition. I need help," she finally admitted, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. James maneuvered his horse closer to the house. "Water still rising on this side of the development. We need to get you out now." Victoria nodded, gathering her composure along with the small waterproof bag she'd packed with essentials. "What do I need to do?" "The balcony's too high for a direct transfer," James assessed. "I'm going to come up and help you down." Before she could protest, he'd dismounted into waist-deep water and was wading toward her front door. Minutes later, he appeared at the top of her stairs, dripping but determined. "Not exactly how I imagined getting invited into your home," he said, a hint of that dry humor that seemed to be his trademark. Victoria managed a weak smile. "I left my social calendar downstairs, unfortunately. It's probably floating somewhere near the kitchen by now." It was a small moment, the first glimpse of understanding between them. As James helped her secure her bag and led her carefully down the stairs through knee-deep water, Victoria felt something shift. This wasn't the calculated, antagonistic sheriff she'd constructed in her mind. This was simply a man doing what needed to be done. Outside, the transfer to horseback proved more challenging than expected. Victoria's designer boots slipped on the submerged porch steps, sending her crashing into the murky water. James reacted instantly, pulling her up before she could be fully submerged, his strong hand steadying her with surprising gentleness. "I've got you," he said quietly. "Trust me." Those two words, "trust me," hung between them, weighted with their contentious history. Victoria looked into his eyes and saw no triumph, no satisfaction at her predicament. Only determination and a steadfast professionalism that made her previous accusations seem suddenly petty and Outside the sheriff's office, the rain came down in sheets, transforming Riverdale's Main Street into a small river. Victoria's attorney hustled her toward the Range Rover, holding his briefcase over her head in a futile attempt to keep her dry. Their dignified exit had been thoroughly ruined by Mother Nature, a fact not lost on the locals huddled under shop awnings, watching with poorly concealed amusement. Inside the vehicle, Victoria slammed her palm against the steering wheel. "This is absurd. How can one man be both the accused and the judge? It's a textbook conflict of interest." Her attorney, Jeffrey Winters of Winters and Associates, loosened his Italian silk tie and sighed. "I tried to tell you, rural jurisdictions operate differently. Their governmental structures are often intertwined." "Intertwined," Victoria hissed. "It's incestuous. That woman Martha is his cousin. The old man has known his family for 3 generations. How is any of this legal?" "It's perfectly legal," Jeffrey replied, his tone suggesting he was already calculating how to gracefully exit this case. Small towns often have overlapping roles due to limited population and resources. "I can pursue this at the state level, but frankly, Victoria, they're going to side with established agricultural operations almost every time." Victoria stared through the rain-streaked windshield at the sheriff's office. Through the window, she could see James Caldwell calmly talking with Martha and Bill, likely already discussing her complaints. "What about the survey discrepancy?" she demanded. "The fence line violation?" Jeffrey shuffled uncomfortably. "Well, about that. While you were getting coffee this morning, I had a word with the county records office. That creek boundary, there's an addendum from 1978, handwritten, barely legible, but legally binding, acknowledging the creek's movement and adjusting the property line accordingly. Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up. That's impossible. My surveyor found nothing. Your surveyor probably only checked digital records. This was in a leather-bound volume that hasn't been digitized. Martha pulled it for me specifically. He hesitated. It seems Sheriff Caldwell suggested she might want to show me that particular book. Victoria's manicured nails dug into the leather steering wheel. He knew I'd find the discrepancy. He's been playing me this entire time. If it helps, Jeffrey offered weakly. The environmental report came back while we were in the meeting. Bluesky found no violations. In fact, he winced slightly. Their report specifically commends Wild Oak Ranch for sustainable water management practices that exceed industry standards. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. I paid them $15,000 for rush testing. Science is science, Jeffrey shrugged. Look, I'll be blunt. You're paying me $400 an hour to tell you what you want to hear. But as your attorney, I'm obligated to tell you what you need to hear. You're not going to win this fight, not through legal channels. The drive back to Saddlebrook Estates was tense and silent. As they passed Wild Oak Ranch, Victoria noticed Abby Caldwell leading a group of children on ponies, colorful raincoats bright against the gray downpour. The children were laughing despite being soaked, clearly having the time of their lives. At Victoria's driveway, Jeffrey gathered his things and hesitated before exiting. One more thing you should know. I did some digging into Sheriff Caldwell. Before returning to take over his family's ranch and becoming sheriff, he spent 15 years with the FBI's white-collar crime division. The man is not the simple country lawman he appears to be. The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. She'd been approaching this all wrong, underestimating her opponent at every turn. As Jeffrey's car disappeared down the road, Victoria sat in her darkened garage, listening to the storm intensify. Her phone lit up with weather alerts, flash flood warnings for areas north of town. She dismissed them irritably. Her development was new, built to modern standards. Unlike that dilapidated ranch, Saddlebrook Estates surely had proper drainage systems. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging her home into darkness just as thunder shook the very foundation. After the town council meeting adjourned, the community hall buzzed with conversation. Victoria found herself surrounded by Riverdale residents, many of whom had once given her a wide berth, now eager to discuss the conservation easement proposal and how it might benefit their properties. James observed from a distance, nursing a cup of coffee, as Victoria skillfully fielded questions. She had a natural talent for making complex financial concepts accessible, explaining how the easement could actually increase property values by ensuring protected green space in perpetuity. It was the same persuasive energy she'd once directed against his ranch, now channeled toward preserving Riverdale's character. Quite the turnaround, commented Martha, sliding into the chair beside him. Remember when she called me an antiquated record keeper at that first council meeting? James chuckled. People can surprise you. Some more than others. Martha replied, nodding toward the developer from Jefferson Group, who was packing up his presentation materials with a sour expression. He thought this was going to be an easy sell. Most folks do. When they first come to Riverdale, James stood, placing his empty cup on a nearby table. Think I'll head home. Early morning tomorrow. Outside, the spring air carried the scent of apple blossoms from the old orchard behind the community hall. James was unlocking his truck when he heard footsteps approaching. Running away without saying goodbye? Victoria asked, her voice lacking the sharp edge it once carried. She changed into riding boots and jeans after the meeting, her new normal attire, a far cry from the polished business suits she'd worn 6 months ago. Figured you had your hands full in there, James replied. Impressive proposal. Your foundation work is making a real difference. Victoria leaned against his truck, looking out toward the mountains. I never thanked you properly, you know. For the flood rescue. You've thanked me plenty. Not for that. Victoria turned to face him. For not giving me what I wanted when I first came here. James raised an eyebrow. If you caved to my demands, If you changed your ranch to appease me, I would have missed the whole point of this place. She gestured toward the town around them. I came here running away from corporate politics, from a world where everything was about competition and winning at all costs. Then I tried to bring that same mindset here. We all bring our baggage with us, James said simply. My point is, Victoria continued, sometimes what we think we want isn't what we need. I thought I wanted a perfectly controlled environment. What I needed was to remember how to be part of something authentic. A comfortable silence settled between them. In the distance, they could hear the high school band practicing for the upcoming Founders' Day parade. The Jefferson group will be back, James finally said. Developers always are. And we'll be ready, Victoria replied with confidence. The Heritage Committee has already started documenting historical sites throughout the county. James's official visit to Victoria Preston came the following morning. He arrived at her pristine colonial-style home in his sheriff's SUV, purposely parking on the gravel shoulder rather than her immaculate circular driveway. The message was subtle but clear. This was official business, not a social call. Victoria answered the door in designer athleisure wear, a Bluetooth earpiece tucked into one ear. Her momentary surprise quickly transformed into a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sheriff Caldwell, what an unexpected pleasure. She glanced pointedly at her Apple Watch. I'm in the middle of a conference call with my investment team. Perhaps we could schedule something. James removed his hat politely but remained on the porch. This won't take long, Miss Preston. I'm here on a matter of legal importance. Something flickered in Victoria's expression, uncertainty, perhaps even a flash of concern. She stepped aside to let him in. The interior of Victoria's home looked like a spread from Architectural Digest, all clean lines, neutral tones, and carefully curated art pieces that had likely been selected by a professional designer rather than from personal connection. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the view of Wild Oak Ranch in the distance, a view Victoria was simultaneously capitalizing on and campaigning against. You've been approaching my employees with financial offers for information, James said without preamble. That crosses a line, Miss Preston. Victoria tapped her earpiece. Simon, I'll call you back. She turned to James with a practiced corporate smile. I merely offered compensation for an informational interview. Your ranch hand, Miguel was it, seemed concerned about certain practices but afraid to speak freely. Miguel has worked for my family since he was 16. His father worked for my father. There isn't a thing about our operation he wouldn't tell me directly. James kept his voice even. What you attempted is legally questionable at best. Victoria's smile tightened. Is that why you're here? To intimidate me? To remind me you wear a badge? I'm here as a courtesy, James replied. To suggest we find a way to coexist before this escalates further. My daughter Abby, who, by the way, graduated from Boston College Law, suggested mediation. How fascinating, Victoria said, her tone making clear it was anything but. She walked to her kitchen island and retrieved a folder. While we're exchanging courtesies, you might want to see what my surveyor found yesterday. She slid a document across the counter, a property survey highlighting the disputed corner of land where Willow Creek had changed course decades ago. According to county records, that quarter-acre technically falls outside your properly registered deed. It's been incorrectly included in your property for years. Her smile turned predatory. And coincidentally, it's where your southern pasture fence cuts closest to residential property minus 143 feet from my property line, not the 150 required by even your outdated exemptions. James studied the document, his expression unreadable. Victoria had done her homework. This particular corner had been a handshake agreement between his grandfather and the neighboring farmer after the creek shifted during floods in the 1970s. Nothing had ever been formally registered. Interesting approach, he finally said, returning the document. Most folks would introduce themselves to neighbors before measuring their fence lines. Most neighbors don't operate businesses that destroy property values, Victoria countered. She folded her arms. I've already shared this with my attorney. 7 feet might not seem like much to you, Sheriff, but it's the principle. The law is the law, even for those who enforce it. As James placed his hat back on his head and turned to leave, Victoria called after him, "Oh, and you should know, the Bluesky environmental report comes back tomorrow. I paid extra for comprehensive soil and water testing." What she couldn't see as James walked back to his vehicle was the slight smile that crossed his weathered face. Victoria Preston had just made a critical error in her carefully plotted campaign. She'd revealed her strategy too soon.